Ladies, gentlemen, and haradrim of all ages, last week we had a particularly interesting addition to the game as a mid-season content drop in the form of a handful of new rings, unique rings, one for each class, and all of them based off of the class-specific Malignant Heart powers from Season 1. Some of them are pretty awesome, some of them are a little bit lackluster, and some of them aren't that powerful but are actually pretty fun to have around. It's just a really interesting concept that I'm definitely a fan of them continuing in the future. Just the idea of taking some of the interesting or even fan-favorite powers from a previous season and rebalancing and then adding them to the Eternal Realm in the form of unique so that they can stick around forever. That way you do have to trade some power out to be able to use it still, but it isn't just gone from the game forever as a thing that they created that people enjoyed, so I think that's a nice trade-off. That said, it can be assumed that this will then continue to happen in future seasons, at least in some form, and that next season we may be getting some form of the vampiric powers in the form of new uniques, rebalanced to fit in an actual slot, so I thought it would be fun to just talk about how I think that could look, which powers might come back, how many of them, and in what form. The first thing to discuss here is the difference between the vampiric powers and the malignant hearts that makes it a little bit of a tougher thing for them to be able to work out. The clear direction to go with bringing back malignant hearts was in the form of one unique per class because there were a number of class-specific powers, so they just had to choose one of each of those and then build around that. Whereas in Season 2, all of the powers are available to every class, which means there are 22 powers that are not restricted in a way that makes it a clear split if they wanted to stick to the concept of only one power re-added per class. To me, that gives us three options to start off with. One, they choose to sort of randomly associate one power with each class, maybe even mix a couple of them together to make some balance power-wise to each other, something like Chemomancy to Necromancer, just because of the blood power overlap, you know, it's thematic, Bat Familiars or Metamorphosis to Druid because of the natural companions or the shapeshifting, Hectic for Sorcerers, just taking a power that sort of fits the class fantasy of each class and then balancing them to be somewhat equal power overall. The second option that I see is that we only get one or two new uniques, but they are for all classes and they are particularly enjoyed powers from the season. Things like Ravenous for the lucky hit chance at super high attack speed boost, and you need to make that a pretty important slot, honestly, if you're going to keep it around the same power, just because of how strong it actually is. I could even see them making that one an amulet potentially, honestly, and maybe even still nerfing it a bit after doing so. I think a good second one, if they did that then, would just be a way of preserving the vampiric curse as a mechanic just because it's interesting. Maybe even just straight up put Accursed Touch, the major power, on a unique for itself and then buff up the damage of the souls enough to make it actually scale pretty well into endgame. That itself would be pretty solid and avoid having that whole mechanic be lost to time, especially all the animations and the visuals associated with it. Another singular power that I could see working is actually Jagged Spikes. Obviously only a couple of builds can really even generally build around Thorns conceptually in the first place, but I love the idea of Thorns builds because they're a bit silly, so if they just buff this enough to make it actually worth being its own unique and make it part of these Thorns builds, long term, that would be a nice fun addition that probably wouldn't break the game by being required for all the top builds. They could even, as a unique, put it on a slot that just normally wouldn't be able to have Thorns as an affix and then give it a bunch of Thorns as an affix. That way you could just have an extra slot with Thorns and then have the effect too, which would already make it pretty solid for Thorns builds. The third option that I see for them doing this then, the one that is possible, is just sort of mashing powers together into singular items in fun ways, like putting Ravenous and Undying and then also Moonrise into a singular unique, but then, whoa, that's really strong, so maybe it's even an Uber unique. Maybe it's just an amulet, okay? It might be too far to make it an Uber unique, but I could definitely see them doing something like this. A really strong mashup of different powers with an alternative being something like Accursed Touch combined with Flowing Veins, and then also Anticipation as the Vampiric Curse and damage over time combo piece that also buffs ultimates in relation. I think that'd be a really fun little combo. Hell, maybe they even do that concept, but do it as one for each class. Just literally look at what the three most used powers are for each class, stuff them into one unique, and release it that way. I think that would make some sense, actually. Obviously, you would need someone with a bit of knowledge to make sure that they actually all synergize together, rather than just being important powers that were used in multiple different builds that are now overlapping. But I think the concept of, hey, these are the top 5 powers that were used by this class, this is a combination of a few of them that would make a fun item people would love to have on that class forever. So let's do that for one for each class. Maybe there will be some overlap between them, maybe there won't be. I honestly don't think it matters because the idea is that the full combination should be unique for each of the classes, even if certain aspects of it are shared between them. Then I suppose we have our next question here, which is, will this even happen in the first place? Well, they said even before this happened that there is no guarantee at any point that something from a limited time season will return as Eternal Realm content, no matter how well received it is, unless the team itself views this as a good thing for the game long term. That said, but there's no guarantee that this will happen in any shape. Not to mention the different ways I've talked about so far, we may never even get to that point. I think the added challenge that we mentioned earlier, that none of these powers are class specific, will definitely give them a little bit of a hold. It'll make them step a little bit back, not really go forward as ambitiously, as in a weird way, it's harder to justify adding 3 new all-class uniques than it is to justify adding 5 new class-specific uniques, 1 per class, even though it is technically more items, because the idea is the balance of each individual class matters, and so if you have 3 new all-class uniques, you basically need to think of them as being a different item for each class. So it's not really just 3 new items, it's actually 15, because you need to think about how it would interact with this, how it would interact with that, the differences between the different classes. Would this class be too strong with it? How can we change the power then, so that it doesn't break that one class, but it's still worth using on the others? Because the problem is, if you just mess with statistical numbers, you can't really have it balanced for each individual class properly in one item. Things like that. So there are just so many extra considerations when all the classes can use one item. And so I definitely wouldn't be surprised if they do much less as far as bringing back the vampiric powers as Eternal Realm items in the future. I think 1 or 2 generic uniques is the likeliest answer, but even then, that's only if it happens in the first place. What do you all think then? As far as I can tell, people have generally enjoyed Season 2 up to this point, and I think a major part of that, at least early on, was the vampiric powers themselves. The all-class nature of them means that a number of them are just sort of overpowered in certain classes, and rather than being concerned about that, the devs have just done what they said that they were always going to do and let us feel overpowered for this season. 100% bonus attack speed? Sure, why not? Hemomancy procs up to multiple hundreds of thousands? Can't see any issue with that. And the thing is, I think the exact parts of the vampiric powers that make them fun in a seasonal capacity also makes them a lot harder to bring back over to the Eternal Realm. The reason vampiric powers are so fun is because they are so effective and so strong, so noticeably gameplay affecting for everyone. If you bring something like that to the Eternal Realm, you're essentially just going to be changing the whole feeling, the baseline feeling of the game for the future, but still only for the people who happen to have that unique. And if they are as strong as they are in the season right now, everyone will want to have them. That will be a goal that everyone has. But if you nerf the power to bring it back as an internal item, people will probably be unhappy if it's just not just a shell of what it was before. So is it even worth bringing these back in the first place? I don't know. I can't say. That's up to the developers to find out if they can make this little nice spot in the middle that works for everyone, that doesn't break the game but also makes people happy. I just think that this is all interesting stuff to talk about when it comes to the future of this game, of Diablo 4. What are the powers that you would want to see return in the future then? Do you think they would be able to fit in the Eternal Realm power structure, or do you agree that at their current power levels, they would be just a little bit overwhelming to just have as one regular item? Which of the different methods that I mentioned then of turning them into uniques do you think would be the best, and do you even think that they will bring any of these back in the first place? Let me know all of your own thoughts down below, and like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.